If my stepmother had not slapped me across the face in the middle of the kitchen on Thanksgiving, my family would still be eating dinner on a foundation of lies. She thought it was just the two of us in that gleaming room. She forgot about the window looking out to the backyard, and she forgot that my grandfather never arrives late. That night, amidst the smell of turkey and fake toasts, one slap handed me the entire family empire. My name is Eva Moore. I am 27 years old, and I am a nurse anesthetist at Ridgeview Medical Center in Denver. 3 hours ago, I was monitoring the vital signs of a patient during complex spinal surgery. Now, I am driving my 10-year-old sedan into the immaculate, heated driveway of my father's house in Maple Ridge, Colorado, for a Thanksgiving I would rather skip. The invitation had not been an invitation at all. It had been a summons, delivered via a group text from my stepmother. Vanessa, we absolutely must have the whole family together this year. So much to be thankful for. Dinner at 3. I killed the engine. For a moment, I just sat, the silence of the car amplifying the thudding in my chest. The steering wheel was cold under my hands. I could still smell the faint, sterile scent of the hospital on my clothes, a sharp contrast to the manufactured cinnamon apple scent wafting from a discreet diffuser somewhere near the front porch. This house, it was the house I had grown up in, the one my mother had painted, had planted the now mature oak trees in front of. Now, it was a monument to Vanessa. I grabbed the heavy Pyrex dish from the passenger seat. It was still warm. My grandmother's mashed potatoes. The one dish my mother had always insisted on. The one dish that still tasted like home. I stepped out into the cold November air and walked to the front door. A massive, imposing slab of dark wood that had replaced the cheerful red one I remembered. My father, Martin Moore, opened it before I could ring the bell. He looked magnificent. He was the owner of Moore Ridge Construction, and he dressed the part, a cashmere sweater, perfectly pressed trousers, a new, expensive watch gleaming on his wrist. "Eva, you made it, kiddo." He gave me a one-armed hug. His shoulders stiff, his eyes, the same blue as mine, flickered past me to my car, then to the street, then back to my face, but they never quite met mine. It was a practiced welcome, a performance for the benefit of the guests I could already hear inside. "Hi, Dad. Happy Thanksgiving." Come in. You're letting the heat out." I stepped inside, and the warmth hit me, along with a wall of sound, polite laughter, the clinking of glasses, and a voice holding court. The house I remembered was gone. The hardwood floors were now covered in pale, plush beige carpet. The colorful, chaotic art my mother had loved was replaced with massive, abstract canvases in muted tones of gray and taupe. And the walls were covered in them. The new family, Martin, Vanessa, and her son, Tyler. There they were, skiing in Vail, a trip I had only seen on social media. There they were on a boat, Vanessa's hair perfect even in the wind, Tyler steering, my father laughing, a professional portrait of the three of them, perfectly coordinated in cream-colored sweaters, hung over the fireplace where a picture of my mother and me used to be. I scanned the entryway, the living room, the hallway. There was not one single photograph of me. Not one. I had been curated out of my own childhood. "Eva, darling, you're here." Vanessa glided out of the living room, a vision in a winter white silk blouse and tailored trousers. Her blonde hair was flawless, her makeup subtle and expensive. She kissed the air beside my cheek, her hand landing lightly on my arm. Her perfume was strong, something heady and floral. We were so worried the snow might be bad on the pass. "It was fine. Vanessa, happy Thanksgiving." Her smile was bright, but her eyes were cold, and they performed a swift, clinical scan of my appearance. The simple dark sweater, the comfortable jeans I'd driven in, the faint exhaustion under my eyes. I was assessed and found wanting in under 3 seconds. "Let me take that," she said, gesturing to the Pyrex dish. "Oh, you brought potatoes?" The words were coated in honey, but the meaning was clear. "You brought a common dish to my catered affair." How quaint. Just put it on the sideboard. Dear, I'm sure we can find room. The booming voice from the living room got louder. And I told him, I said, Dad, if you're going to give me the keys to the kingdom, you have to let me drive the thing. A chorus of hearty, appreciative laughter followed. I walked into the living room, feeling like an intruder. It was full. Mr. Henderson, the family lawyer who had efficiently rewritten my father's will after the wedding, was there, swirling a glass of amber liquid. Mr. and Mrs. Barkley, owners of the largest lumber supply in the county and key partners for my father's company, were nodding approvingly. These were the important people. And there, in the center of them all, was Tyler Price, Vanessa's son. He was 25, 2 years younger than me, wearing a blazer that looked ridiculous in a living room on a holiday. He had my father's easy confidence, but none of his work ethic. He'd just been gifted a position as a project manager at Moore Ridge Construction, a job he was wildly unqualified for. He saw me and his grin widened. Ava, look at you. Saving lives, right? He didn't wait for an answer, turning back to Mr. Barkley. Anyway, as I was saying, the new downtown project is all about vision. Dad's letting me take the lead on the conceptuals. I found a spot on the edge of the room, invisible. The conversation was a river of praise flowing directly to Tyler. They talked about the new truck the company had leased for him. They talked about the smart investment my father had just made in Tyler's name, a new townhouse development. My stomach clenched. I had a vivid, burning memory of my second year of nursing school. I was drowning in coursework, working 30 hours a week as a barista. And I was still short for my Miller's anesthesia textbook. It was almost $300. I had called Dad, my voice small with shame at having to ask. Eva, you're an adult now, he had said, his voice impatient, distant. You have to learn to budget. We're all tightening our belts here. A week later, Vanessa had posted photos on Facebook of their trip to Cabo. Now my father was beaming at his stepson. He's a natural, isn't he? Martin said to Mr. Henderson. Got a real instinct for the business. Dinner is served, Vanessa called out, her voice bright and performative. We moved to the dining room. The table was enormous, set for 20. It looked like a magazine spread, with a runner of eucalyptus and white pumpkins, gold chargers, and at least 4 different glasses at every setting. My designated seat was at the far end, separated from the main cluster of important guests. It was a seat for an obligation, not a family member. As everyone settled, Vanessa tapped her crystal water glass with a silver knife. The room fell silent. I just want to welcome you all, she said, her hand resting perfectly on my father's arm. She beamed at him, then at the room. We are so truly blessed. When Martin and I brought our families together, we dreamed of moments like this, a full table, a house full of love. She paused, for effect. These important days, these holidays, they are what matter. They remind us to be grateful for what we have, for family, blended and whole. We are always here for each other. I had to look down at my plate. The lie was so thick I felt like I was choking on it. Blended and whole, always here for each other. I thought of the unanswered texts, the canceled visits, the graduation I'd attended alone. I took a sip of water, the lump in my throat hard and painful. My eyes scanned the table again, and I noticed it. One empty chair, tucked into the corner near the kitchen pass-through. It was an older, simpler wooden chair, out of place with Vanessa's upholstered thrones. It was Grandpa Walter's spot, Walter Moore, the man who had actually founded Moore Ridge Construction with his own 2 hands. Long before my father turned it into a brand, he was the only one who ever asked me real questions. Last Christmas, he'd pulled me aside, his hand rough and warm on mine. How's the anesthesiology program, really? Are they treating you right? Don't let those surgeons boss you around. I caught my father's eye and nodded toward the empty chair. Is Grandpa coming? Martin waved a dismissive hand, not bothering to lower his voice. Oh, you know your grandfather. He's late again. Probably lost track of time tinkering with that old truck of his. He'll get here when he gets here. The excuse was too fast, too practiced, and it sent a small chill down my spine. Then the food came. It was catered. Perfectly arranged plates delivered by two servers in black uniforms. The turkey was already carved, fanned out in flawless, identical slices. The sauces were in elegant gravy boats. The side dishes were delicate, artistic, and small. My Pyrex dish of potatoes sat on the sideboard, looking heavy, messy, and out of place. Vanessa, noticing my gaze, smiled. "It's just so much easier this way, isn't it? The holidays are for relaxing, not for slaving away in a kitchen." The meal was a performance. The toasts were all about business. "To Martin and Tyler, the future of Maple Ridge," Mr. Barkley announced. "To Vanessa, for creating such a beautiful home," said Mrs. Barkley. I sat in silence, eating food I hadn't cooked, in a house that was no longer mine. The clinking of expensive silverware on bone china was the only sound under the drone of business talk. I felt exhausted, not just from my shift, but from the crushing weight of being invisible. I was a 27-year-old certified registered nurse anesthetist. I held lives in my hands every week. I made critical decisions in high-stress environments. I had fought my way through one of the most demanding medical programs in the state, on my own. Here, in this room, my achievements were meaningless. I was the leftover daughter, the prop, the one who didn't fit the new narrative. I wondered, for the 1,000th time, what I was doing here. The answer was simple. I came for the one person who might still see me, and he wasn't here. The dinner plates were cleared. Dessert was being served, some tiny, deconstructed pumpkin pie in a martini glass. Tyler, his face flushed with wine, was loudly recounting a story about closing a deal. So I just looked the guy in the eye and said, My father, laughing, motioned to one of the servers. "Tyler needs another glass of wine." As the server moved to pour, Vanessa leaned toward me. The smile she had worn for the guests was gone. Her face was tight, her eyes like chips of ice. Her voice was a low, sharp hiss, meant only for me, cutting through the warm, festive air. "Ava, go and help in the kitchen. At least try to look like a daughter of this house." Her words, "At least try to look like a daughter of this house," hung in the air. A sharp, cold command that sliced through the warm, buttery smell of the catered dessert. I stood up, my own mashed potatoes sitting untouched on the sideboard, a symbol of a past she was determined to erase. As I walked toward the kitchen, the laughter from the dining room faded, and the past flooded in, heavy and thick as the gravy I knew was congealing in its silver boat. This house, this Thanksgiving, it was all a lie. It was a sterile, beige performance. Thanksgiving used to be loud. It used to be chaos. It used to be at Grandpa Walter's farm, in the old drafty house that smelled of wood smoke and roasting turkey, and my mother's apple pies. We would cram 30 people around a table made of 2 dining tables and a sheet of plywood pushed together, sitting on mismatched chairs, kitchen stools, and even the piano bench. The laughter was real. The arguments were real. And the love was so present you could feel it in the floorboards. My mother would be in the kitchen, flour on her cheek, directing traffic, while my father, a different man then, would be in the yard with his brothers, throwing a football. Every eye that met mine was genuine. My mother died when I was 14, cancer. It was fast, brutal, and it took the light out of the house. The silence in the year that followed was deafening, and then, just 1 year after the funeral, my father married Vanessa. She was beautiful, polished, and quick with a charming phrase. Everyone said how wonderful it was, how Martin deserved to be happy again, how lucky he was to find someone so elegant. I saw something else. I saw the way her eyes scanned the furniture my mother had chosen, the subtle wrinkle of her nose. Our first Thanksgiving with Vanessa was the first and last one held at the farm after my mother's death. Vanessa had arrived with her own set of crystal glasses because she couldn't bear to drink from Grandpa's assorted tumblers. She had rearranged the entire buffet, declaring the flow illogical. The food was perfect. The table was decorated like a magazine. with place cards and folded napkins. It was also silent. I was 15, raw with grief, and I made the mistake of telling a story about my mom and a turkey she had accidentally set on fire 5 years earlier. Vanessa's hand landed on my arm, her nails pressing lightly into my skin. "Ava, darling," she said, her voice a sweet poison. "Let's not dwell on such sad things. It's a holiday. We don't want to make the guests uncomfortable." I looked at my father, but he was busy complimenting Vanessa on the civilized atmosphere she had created. I felt my mother being erased, painted over, like the cheerful red door of our old house. Then came Tyler. He was 13 when they married, and from the moment he walked in, he was the talented son. It didn't matter that his report cards were a sea of C's and D's. It didn't matter that he was lazy. Expecting me to pick up after him, Vanessa had a narrative, and she stuck to it. "He's just so brilliant. He gets bored," she would explain to my father. "He's just finding his own path." In my junior year of high school, I won first place in the state science fair for a project on nerve cell regeneration. I was ecstatic. I remember running into the house with the oversized blue ribbon and the small trophy. My father glanced up from some papers. "That's great, kiddo. Good job." Vanessa, however, gave the trophy a brief look. "That's nice, dear," she said, her focus on her phone. "But you really should learn to speak more confidently. You mumbled through that whole explanation. You won't make a real impression in the world if you can't sell yourself." 2 days later, she and my father threw a large, expensive dinner party at a local restaurant. I thought, for a fleeting, stupid moment, that it might be for me. It was for Tyler. He had made the reserve squad for the junior varsity basketball team. He hadn't even played in a game. My father made a speech about dedication and the more competitive spirit. I sat at the end of the table, next to my science fair trophy, which I had brought in my bag, and which I never took out. The erasure became more surgical. When it was time to look at colleges, I brought home brochures for programs out of state, nursing programs with strong reputations. I wanted to be in medicine, just like I had always told my mom. I was explaining a program in North Carolina to my father when Vanessa cut in, her voice light and reasonable. "Ava, let's be practical. Those schools are absurdly expensive. The community college here is perfectly fine for your general classes. We need to be saving our money. Martin." She smiled at him, a warm, wifely smile. "We have to think about the family's real future." Her eyes flickered to Tyler, who was playing a video game on the sofa. For just half a second, my father, seeing his escape, nodded. "Vanessa's right. Eva, let's be smart about this." I didn't go to community college. I got a scholarship to a state school in Denver, but the message was clear. My future was not the real future. The only person who ever saw through the performance was Grandpa Walter. After the college visit was vetoed, he found me in the old barn at the farm, brushing one of the horses. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just stood there, smelling of motor oil and old wood. "You want to go into medicine," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, my throat tight. "I want to be a nurse anesthetist, like Aunt Clara was." "That's a hard road. A good road." He reached into his worn denim jacket and pulled out a small, crumpled envelope. "This is just a little something. Don't tell your father." Inside was $200. "You buy that anatomy book you were talking about, the used one, and you study." He put his rough, calloused hand on my shoulder. "Don't you wait for anyone in this house to give you permission to be brilliant. Eva, you just go and be it." When I graduated from high school, I was valedictorian. I had sent out the invitations myself. The week before the ceremony, I asked Vanessa if she had mailed the one I'd given her for Grandpa Walter. She clapped a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with performative shock. "Oh, Ava, I am so sorry. With all the planning for Tyler's summer trip, it must have slipped my mind. It must still be in my car." I knew she was lying. I ran to my car, drove to the farm, but he wasn't there. I cried the whole way back, but as I was walking up to the podium, heart hammering, ready to give my speech to a crowd where my family sat in the third row, My father looking at his watch. Vanessa whispering to Tyler. I saw him. Grandpa Walter. He was standing at the very back of the gymnasium, arms crossed, wearing his good suit. He hadn't gotten the invitation, but a neighbor had told him the date. He had shown up anyway. He caught my eye and gave me a single, proud nod. I delivered my speech directly to him. Year by year. Thanksgiving moved. It left the farm, which Vanessa called rustic but terribly inconvenient, and settled permanently in my father's newly renovated, beige-toned house. The guest list changed. The loud, loving aunts and uncles were replaced by my father's business partners and Vanessa's high society friends. The holiday became what it was tonight, a performance of wealth and success, starring Martin, Vanessa, and Tyler. Grandpa Walter was still invited, but he was relegated to that seat of honor, the chair in the corner, where he was safely out of the way, a relic to be nodded at but not truly engaged with. I left for Denver. I got into the nursing program on scholarships and student loans. I worked 2 jobs, serving lattes at dawn and bussing tables at night. My father sent Tyler a monthly allowance that was more than I made in 2 weeks. When I mentioned how hard it was, Vanessa had smiled that tight, pitying smile. But you're so strong, Eva. You're independent. It's good for your character. Tyler is, well, he's more sensitive. He needs our support. The phone calls home became hollow echoes. Dad, I got the job in the surgical ICU. Oh, that's great. Kiddo, listen, I've got to run. Tyler just got his new truck and we're taking it for a spin. Vanessa, I got into the nurse anesthetist program. It's one of the top in the region. That's nice, dear. That's a lot of school, isn't it? Well, you'll never guess what Tyler did. He convinced his father to invest in that new condo development. Such a mind for business. The final thread snapped 3 months ago, my graduation from the advanced program, the culmination of years of sleepless nights, crushing debt, and relentless study. This time, I had flown home to give them the invitation in person. They had all promised. We wouldn't miss it for the world, my father had said, hugging me. We are so proud. 2 days before the ceremony, I got the text. It was from Vanessa. So terribly sorry, darling. But a fantastic last-minute deal to Bermuda came up, and we just couldn't pass it up. You know how your father needs to de-stress. We'll be thinking of you. Send us pictures. XO. I looked at that old message on my phone screen just last night. Before I started my shift, I had stared at it. The XO burning like acid. I had walked onto my unit, gowned up, and spent the next 12 hours managing anesthesia for 3 complex surgeries. My hands steady, my mind clear. I had come today for Grandpa. I had come to show him I was still standing. And now, Vanessa's sharp, impatient voice cut through my memory, yanking me back to the present. Ava, did you hear me? The kitchen, now. I blinked. The images of my mother's graduation, of Grandpa's proud nod, of the text from Bermuda, all swirling in my head. I looked at Tyler, who was now accepting another glass of expensive red wine, laughing at his own joke. He was the son of the house. I was the help. Yes, Vanessa, I said, my voice quiet, my body moving on autopilot toward the kitchen door. I heard you. The invitation arrived, as it always did, not as a request but as a declaration. I was at Ridgeview Medical Center, 3 hours into a grueling night shift, standing under the harsh fluorescent lights of the nurses' station. My phone vibrated in my scrub pocket, a short, insistent buzz against my hip. I pulled it out, rubbing the exhaustion from my eyes. It was the family group chat. Vanessa had posted a photo of the dining room table, already set for Thanksgiving. It was a sea of beige and gold, looking cold, sterile, and perfect. The caption read, "This year is so important. We have so much to celebrate. We must have the whole family together. Dinner at 3 p.m. I sighed, the sound lost in the rhythmic beeping of a distant heart monitor. I had already put in a request to work the holiday, double pay, and a valid excuse to avoid the performance. Sarah, another CRNA and my closest friend at the hospital, glanced over from her charting. "What's that face?" she asked, not looking up from her screen. "Let me guess. The stepmother?" I showed her the phone. She squinted. "That's not an invitation. Eva, that's a summons." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. "Tell me about it." I had until morning to find someone to cover my shift. Part of me, the part that was bone-tired and fed up, wanted to ignore it, to forget to reply, but I knew the fallout. My shift ended at 7 a.m. I drove home through the gray Denver dawn, my apartment feeling cold and empty. I had just fallen into a restless, shallow sleep when my phone rang on the nightstand, the specific ringtone I had set for my father. I let it ring twice before picking up, my voice thick with sleep. "Eva, you're awake. Good." He always assumed I was on his schedule. "Hi, Dad. I just got off a night shift." Right. Listen, Eva, you're coming on Thursday, right? Vanessa sent the text." "I don't know. Dad, I'm scheduled to work. It's hard to find cover on a holiday." A heavy sigh on his end, the sound of his impatience. "Eva, please, don't make this difficult. You know Mr. and Mrs. Barkley will be there. The Hendersons. It's important for the company. People look at our family, you know. We can't have the nurse daughter abandoning us for Thanksgiving. It doesn't look good." The nurse daughter, not my daughter, not Eva, a role I played in his business portfolio. When he wanted to brag, I was a specialist, a nurse anesthetist, top of her class. When he wanted to guilt me, I was just the nurse, a generic caregiver whose absence was an inconvenience. "I'll see what I can do." "Dad," I said. The line went dead. I hung up, my heart a cold, heavy knot. I stared at the ceiling for 10 minutes before the phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Vanessa's number. I closed my eyes and answered. Her voice was liquid gold, dripping with false sweetness. "Eva, darling, I am so glad I caught you. I was just talking to your father, and we are so looking forward to seeing you. I know you're busy with your hospital work, but this is such a wonderful opportunity." "An opportunity?" "Yes, a chance for you to see everyone, to show them how successful you've become in your own right. We're so proud, and honestly," her voice dropped, becoming conspiratorial, "it just means so much to your father to have everyone here. We just have to present a united front. You understand? Family is everything." I understood perfectly. This was not a family dinner. It was a PR event. It was a performance of The Happy, Successful Moore Family, staged for the benefit of my father's business partners and the town's legal counsel. My role was the successful but humble daughter, living proof that Martin Moore was a patriarch who had it all, including a child from his first tragic marriage who still adored him and his new, perfect wife. My attendance was non-negotiable. "I'll be there, Vanessa," I said, the words tasting like ash. "I'll get my shift covered." "Wonderful, darling. We'll see you at 3. She hung up. I threw the phone onto the pillow and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to sit at that table and be invisible, to be a prop in her play. But as I lay there, another thought surfaced, sharper and more urgent. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, had called me last week. She had seen Grandpa Walter at the hardware store. He looked frail. "Eva," she'd said, her voice worried. "He has a bad cough he can't shake, and he just seems diminished. That woman doesn't look after him." My grandfather, the one person in that family who had never lied to me. I picked up my phone again and dialed the landline for the farm. It rang 6 times, and I was about to hang up when he answered, his voice breathless and rough. "Yeah? Grandpa, it's Eva." "Eva girl. Well, this is a surprise. You doing okay out there in the big city?" "I'm fine. Grandpa, how are you? Aunt Carol said you've been sick." There was a pause, and I heard him cough, a dry rattling sound that scared me. It's nothing. Just a cold. Can't shake it." He cleared his throat. "Your father call you?" Pestering you about this Thanksgiving thing? You could say that. Are you going? Reckon I have to. Gotta make sure he doesn't sign away the whole company to that boy of hers before the pie is served. He said it as a joke, but the bitterness was real. His voice was hoarse, strained with age. He sounded tired, more tired than I had ever heard him. I'll be there too. Grandpa, I'll see you on Thursday. All right, kid, he coughed again. You just watch yourself. Don't let them gobble you up like the main course. You hear me? I hear you, Grandpa. I'll see you then. I hung up. The decision now solid, but for a different reason. I wasn't going for them. I was going for him. The next day, the official script arrived. It was an email from Vanessa, sent to me, my father, and Tyler, the subject. Thanksgiving Day, our plan. It was a detailed, bullet-pointed itinerary. Arrival, 2:30 p.m. Please be prompt. Guests arrive at 2:45. Dress code, festive elegant. This meant no scrubs, no jeans, nothing that suggested I'd just rolled out of bed. It meant beige, cream, or muted jewel tones. Her colors. Conversation points, safe topics. Tyler's wonderful new role as project manager. The new Moore Ridge downtown development. Dad's successful bid on the Barclay lumber contract. Topics to avoid. For a harmonious day. Any mention of my mother. This was an unspoken rule, now written. Politics, obvious. My hospital shifts, Vanessa had once told me. Nobody wants to hear about sick people at a dinner party. Eva, it's so draining. Any complaints about work, fatigue, or stress? I stared at the email. I was being cast, directed, and given my lines. I was the supporting actress, brought in to make the leads, Martin, Vanessa, and Tyler, look good. My job was to smile, nod, affirm their success, and reflect their glory, all while remaining conveniently in the background. The day before Thanksgiving, I was on my last shift before the holiday. We were trying to discharge an elderly patient, a man in his 90s who had recovered well from a hip replacement. He was stabilized, and the case manager was trying to coordinate his pickup with his son. I've left 4 messages. The case manager, Maria, said, rubbing her temples. The son dropped him at the emergency room 6 days ago and hasn't been back. He's not answering his phone. We're going to have to send him to a state facility until we can sort out the guardianship. I looked into the patient's room. He was sitting up in his chair, staring out the window, looking small and confused. He had a picture of a smiling family on his bedside table. They had brought him here, and then they had vanished. A cold, visceral dread washed over me. I saw my grandfather. I saw him sitting in that corner chair at Vanessa's perfect table, a relic they were obliged to display. I thought of his hoarse voice, his diminished appearance. I thought of how Vanessa and my father spoke about him, with that patronizing impatience, as if he were a problem to be managed rather than the man who built the company that paid for their beige carpets and cashmere sweaters. They were just waiting for him to become inconvenient enough to be put away. That night, when I got home from my shift, I didn't go to sleep. I went to my small kitchen. I pulled out the biggest mixing bowl I owned. I took out the cream cheese, the butter, the bag of potatoes. I was going to bring Grandma Walter's mashed potato recipe, the one my mother had made every year, the one that was heavy, rich, and completely unapologetically homemade, the one Vanessa despised, calling it peasant food. It was a small, quiet act of defiance. It was my way of reminding them, and myself, that I was a part of a family line that existed long before she arrived. On Thanksgiving morning, I loaded the heavy Pyrex dish, covered in foil, into my car. I had my overnight bag, a simple dark green dress. It wasn't beige, but it was elegant enough to avoid a fight. Before I left, I sat in my apartment, checking my work email one last time. An unread message from Human Resources sat at the top of my inbox. Subject: Fellowship Recommendation. My heart leaped. I clicked it open. Dear Ms. Moore, We are writing to inform you that based on your exemplary performance and the unanimous recommendation of the anesthesiology department heads, you have been selected for the Advanced Pediatric CRNA Training Fellowship at Ridgeview. This is a highly competitive program, and we are thrilled to offer you this opportunity. I dropped my head into my hands, a surge of pure, unadulterated pride making my hands shake. This was it. This was the fellowship I had dreamed of, the one I had worked for, the one that would elevate my career to an entirely new level. It was rare. It was prestigious. It was real. My first instinct, the old conditioned reflex, was to take a screenshot and text it to my father. See? I did it. I'm successful. Aren't you proud? I even pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the camera app, and then I stopped. Why? So he could say, "That's nice, kiddo," before changing the subject to Tyler's new truck. So Vanessa could smile that tight, plastic smile and say, "Oh, more school? When will you ever find time to settle down?" So my greatest professional achievement could be reduced to a conversation point they could use to impress the Barclays? No. I put the phone down. I closed the laptop. This news was mine. It was too valuable to be thrown onto their table and tarnished. I picked up my keys and the warm dish of potatoes. I walked out of my apartment, locking the door behind me. I got into my car and started the engine, the smell of butter and garlic salt filling the small space. Just one day, I whispered to myself as I pulled onto the highway, heading toward Maple Ridge. I can get through one day. For Grandpa. I pushed through the swinging door into the kitchen, the sound of the dining room, the laughter, the pontificating, the clinking of glasses, was instantly muffled, replaced by the high, sterile hum of the ventilation hood. The kitchen was offensively bright. Under-cabinet lights glared off every polished surface, from the stainless steel, 6-burner stove to the vast white marble island. 2 servers I didn't recognize were scraping catered leftovers into a bin, their movements efficient and silent. The air was thick with the conflicting smells of rich gravy, discarded turkey, and the lemony scent of Vanessa's industrial-strength cleaning spray. The door swung shut behind me, sealing me in. Vanessa was standing by the oversized refrigerator, pouring herself a glass of wine. She did not turn around, but her voice, when she spoke, was not the one she had used in the dining room. All the honey was gone. It was flat, hard, and cold. "You were late," she said. "What? I was here at 2:30. Vanessa, you said—" She turned then, slow and deliberate. Her glass was in her hand, her smile gone, her face a tight mask of irritation. "You were late to the table. I had to call you. In front of our guests. In front of the Barclays. Did you see the way Mrs. Barclay looked at me? As if I can't even manage my own family. You embarrassed me." I was putting my dish on the sideboard, the one I brought. I could hear the defensiveness in my own voice, and I hated it. "Your dish?" She let out a small, sharp laugh that was more like a bark. "Right, the potatoes, which no one touched. We had truffle-infused potatoes. Ava, from the caterer." She took a step closer, lowering her voice so the servers couldn't hear. "You come in here with your sad little casserole, smelling like a hospital, and you sit there pouting, making everyone uncomfortable. You just had to make it about you, didn't you?" "That's not true," I said, my pulse starting to thrum in my ears, the exhaustion from my shift, the stress of the drive, the humiliation at the table. It was all bubbling up, hot and acidic. "I came here straight from an emergency case. I barely slept. I drove 3 hours. I brought the one thing Grandma Walter—" "Oh, stop it," she cut me off, her hand slicing the air. "Just stop it. Stop playing the victim. It is so tired. Ava, that's all you've ever done. Poor me. I had to work. Poor me. I'm so tired. Do you have any idea what it takes to put an event like this together? The real work?" "I'm not playing the victim, Vanessa. I'm just telling you." "You are always the victim," she hissed, stepping closer still. The servers, sensing the shift in the air, quietly slipped out the back door to the patio. We were alone. You have been given everything. This family has supported you, given you an education. That's not true. I got scholarships. I worked 2 jobs. I took out loans that I'm still paying off. We gave you a home, she snapped, her voice rising. We give you a place to come for holidays, a place to belong, and you repay us with this sullen, ungrateful attitude. You sit there with a look on your face like you're better than everyone. Tyler. He knows what it means to be part of a family. He understands gratitude. He thinks about the future, about what's good for us. You only think about yourself. The injustice of it, the sheer, breathtaking audacity of her lie, it broke something in me. The years of being erased, of being the afterthought, of having my achievements minimized while his failures were celebrated. It all coalesced into one cold, hard point of clarity. I stopped backing up. I set my jaw. I don't think I have to thank you for abandoning me every single time I needed my parents. Silence. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to roar in my ears. Vanessa's face, which had been tight with irritation, suddenly went slack with shock. And then, just as quickly, it flushed a deep, ugly red. I had hit the nerve. I had spoken the truth that was never, ever allowed to be spoken in this house. Her anger was a physical thing. It changed the air in the room. She was no longer the elegant hostess. She was something primal and furious. She set her wineglass down on the marble counter with a sharp clack. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "You ungrateful little... How dare you, after everything we have done, after everything I have done to hold this family together." She advanced on me, and this time I did back away, until my hips hit the cold, hard edge of the counter by the sink. I was trapped. "You will not smear this family," she spat, her face inches from mine. Her perfume was suffocating. "You will not come into my house and imply that we have been anything but generous to you. If you ever say something like that again, I swear to God, Ava, you will have no place here anymore. Do you understand me? You will be nothing to us." My heart was hammering against my ribs. My hands were shaking. I was backed against the sink, the large, dark window over it just a black mirror reflecting the scene, reflecting the harsh overhead lights and the contorted mask of her face. I should have been quiet. I should have done what I always did, swallowed it, nodded, apologized, and escaped. But I was 27. I had just been offered the pediatric fellowship. I was not a child. "I understand," I said, my voice quiet but shaking. "I understand that you're threatened by me." Her hand moved so fast I didn't even see it. It was not a movie slap. It was a hard, sharp, flat crack that echoed in the sterile kitchen. My head snapped to the side, my hair whipping across my face. A white-hot, stinging pain exploded across my cheek and jaw. For a split second, there was no sound at all, just the ringing in my ears. My hands, in their shock, had opened, the Pyrex dish I had been holding. The dish I had carried for 3 hours, the dish my grandmother had taught my mother to make, fell from my grasp. It hit the Italian tile floor with a sickening, final crash. Glass didn't shatter, but the dish itself did. Heavy ceramic broke into 3 large pieces, and a cloud of white, fluffy potatoes, steam still rising, splattered across the beige grout, across the stainless steel kick plate of the dishwasher, across Vanessa's expensive suede-like shoes. I slowly brought my hand to my face. My cheek was on fire. I was stunned, speechless, less from the pain, which was already turning into a deep, throbbing ache, than from the sheer stunning impossibility of it. I was 27 years old. I was a medical professional. And my stepmother had just hit me in my father's kitchen because I had brought the wrong side dish and spoken the truth. Tears sprang to my eyes, hot and immediate, but they were tears of rage, not of sadness. Vanessa looked down at the mess on the floor, at the potatoes on her shoes, and her rage doubled. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my bicep like claws. "You clumsy, stupid girl," she seethed, shaking me. "Look what you did! Look at this mess!" She leaned in again, her voice a venomous whisper. "You are a burden, Ava. You have always been a burden. You think you're so smart? With your little nursing certificates? You are nothing but a little girl clinging to a job to make you feel superior. You are just like your mother." That was it. "Get your hands off me," I said, my voice low and dead. I wrenched my arm out of her grasp, shoving her hand away. I was shaking from head to toe, but I would not cry. I would not beg. I would not give her the satisfaction. I looked her directly in the eye, my face throbbing. Is this how a stepmother treats a daughter in this house? The question hung in the air. It was a simple question, but it was loaded, and it snapped the spell. It was the word daughter and house. It reminded her, not of our relationship, but of the guests, of the performance happening just 20 feet away. Her mouth opened, ready for another attack, but her eyes suddenly shifted. They moved past my shoulder, past my stinging cheek. They flickered to the black rectangle of the window over the sink, the window that looked out onto the dark, rain-soaked backyard. Her focus broke. The rage in her eyes was instantly snuffed out, replaced by something else, a flicker of, what? Confusion? Shock? Her face, which had been crimson, went pale. She stared at the window for 1 second, 2. Her grip on my arm, which she had reached for again, went slack. She took a half step back, her eyes darting from the window to me and back again. She had seen something, or she thought she had seen something. And just like that, the mask was back on. It was a little crooked, the smile too tight, but it was there. She smoothed the front of her silk blouse, her chest still heaving slightly. She turned and pulled the kitchen door open. The sound of the party rushed back in, loud and jarring. My father's booming laugh, Mr. Barkley telling a story, the faint sound of Christmas music she had put on. Vanessa turned back to me, her voice once again the bright, cheerful hostess. She was loud enough for the guests to hear if they were listening. "Oh, Eva, you are such a klutz," she said, with a light, tinkling laugh. "You've made a terrible mess. Well, clean it up quickly. The servers are busy." She lowered her voice just a fraction, the steel returning. "Clean this up, and then you come back out to that table, and you put a smile on your face. You are bringing down the entire mood." She didn't wait for an answer. She let the door swing shut, leaving me alone. I stood there for a long time, frozen. The tile was cold beneath my feet. My mashed potatoes, my grandmother's recipe, were a cooling, congealing mess on the floor. My cheek was a blazing, throbbing beacon of pain, and from the dining room, I could hear the sound of my family, laughing and toasting, celebrating a Thanksgiving that did not include me. I found a dustpan and brush under the sink, my movements stiff, robotic. I swept the broken ceramic and the ruined potatoes into a pile. I used paper towels to wipe the greasy, starchy smear from the floor and from Vanessa's suede-like shoes, which she had conveniently left by the back door. I did it all in a fog of silence, the ringing in my ears slowly subsiding, replaced by the throb in my cheek. I rinsed the paper towels in the sink where I had been trapped. I looked out the window over the sink, the one Vanessa had stared at, but I saw nothing, just my own ghostly reflection in the glass, streaked with rain. My left cheek was already pink and starting to swell. I took a deep, shuddering breath, bundled the mess into a garbage bag, and tied it shut. I splashed cold water on my face, dried it gently, and pushed the swinging door open. The wall of festive sound hit me again, a physical blow. I walked back to my seat. My dessert, the tiny, absurd pie in a glass, was waiting. I picked up the spoon. Vanessa, seeing me return, caught my eye from across the table. She gave me a small, tight smile, a warning. Then she leaned toward Mrs. Barkley, her voice carrying. "Eva is just so sensitive. A little family tension over a spilled dish, and she gets overwrought. You know how these young career women are, so high-strung." Mrs. Barkley nodded sympathetically. her eyes flicking to me with a look of pity that was worse than the slap. I sat in silence, spooning the cold, sweet mousse into my mouth. It tasted like nothing. The guests, having witnessed the drama and its tidy conclusion, turned their full attention back to the star of the show. Tyler was describing his vision for the downtown project. His words were a meaningless drone. I was invisible again, which was exactly what she wanted. And then, the front door opened. A gust of cold, wet air swept into the dining room. All heads turned. Grandpa Walter stood in the entryway, his old wool coat dripping rain onto the pristine beige carpet. He looked smaller than I remembered, his face gray with fatigue, and the cough I'd heard on the phone announced his arrival before he did. A deep, rattling bark. "Walter! You're here!" Vanessa was on her feet in an instant, a napkin dropping from her lap. She glided over to him, her face a mask of delighted, concerned affection. "We were so worried. You're soaking wet. You poor man. Martin, get your father a towel." My father, annoyed at the interruption, scraped his chair back. Grandpa Walter didn't look at Vanessa. He didn't look at my father. His eyes scanned the room, past the guests, past Tyler, until they found me, sitting at the far end of the table. He stopped. He just looked at me. It was a long, steady, unblinking gaze. He saw the way I was holding my jaw. He saw the redness on my cheek, bright even in the dim, golden light. His eyes, normally faded blue, seemed to sharpen, to clear. I saw a flicker of something in them I had never seen before, a cold, quiet anger that made my breath catch. He held my gaze for what felt like a lifetime, a silent, profound communication passing between us. He knew. I didn't know how he knew. I just knew that he saw me. "Walter? Are you all right?" Vanessa's voice was sharp, pulling him from the moment. She grabbed his arm, her grip proprietary, and physically turned him away from me. Come in. Let's get you a drink." "I'm fine, Vanessa," he rasped, shrugging her hand off his coat. He coughed again, into an old handkerchief. "Just rain." "Well, you know everyone, of course," Vanessa said loudly, laughing as she steered him toward the guests, a shepherdess managing a wayward, muddy sheep. The man who started it all, the founder of Moore Ridge Construction. We're all just standing on his shoulders, aren't we, Martin? "That's right, Dad. Good of you to make it," my father said, handing him a towel with a look of impatience. Grandpa accepted the towel, his gaze still distant. He allowed himself to be settled into his designated corner chair, the one that didn't match. A server brought him a plate of food, which he barely touched. He accepted a glass of water, waving away the wine. And he watched. He didn't talk. He just sat there, a silent, damp sentinel at the edge of the party. I noticed something odd. Every few minutes, his eyes would drift from the conversation, past me, and fix on the kitchen window. It was just a dark rectangle at the far end of the open-plan room, showing nothing but the rainy blackness. He would stare at it, his brow furrowed, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Then his gaze would return to Vanessa, who was now in full performance mode, laughing at Tyler's jokes. The conversation, briefly interrupted, resumed its main purpose. As I was telling Tyler, "Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, said, swirling his brandy, "The simplest way to handle the transfer is a phased transition of the C shares. We can start moving the bulk of the assets into the new holding company, under your and Tyler's names, Martin, as long as Walter is agreeable to the new structure." My father nodded, leaning forward. "Dad, we're just discussing the plan, the one we talked about, to secure the company's future, for Tyler." Grandpa looked at him, his eyes veiled. "The future? Huh." "Exactly," Vanessa chirped. "It's so important to have a clear line of succession, and with Tyler showing such incredible instinct for the business." I suddenly understood. This was it. This was why the dinner was so important. This was why the guests were the lawyer and the business partners. It wasn't a Thanksgiving dinner. It was a coronation, a soft, social, turkey-scented coup. They were presenting the transfer of power to my grandfather under the guise of a festive family meal, using the audience as social pressure to get him to agree. They were leveraging his legacy to fund Tyler's, and they were doing it right in front of him, assuming he was too old, too tired, or too out of it to object. A small, bitter laugh threatened to escape me. I had been so worried about my fellowship, my tiny, personal, hard-won achievement. It was microscopic in this room, but the rage, the fresh, stinging rage from the kitchen, made me reckless. "Speaking of achievements," I said, my voice cutting into a lull. The table went quiet. Everyone looked at me. It was the first time I had spoken in an hour. "I actually got some good news this morning. I was offered the Pediatric Anesthesiology Fellowship at Ridgeview. It's a national program." "Oh, how nice for you, dear." Vanessa cut in. Her smile a painted-on slash. She didn't even let me finish. She immediately turned to Tyler, her eyes bright. "Speaking of achievements, Tyler, you must tell Mr. Henderson about the cabin you're looking at in Aspen. He found it through some very smart investments. Such a good head on his shoulders for finances." The spotlight snapped back to him. The moment was over. I was dismissed. The table moved on, and I was left in the wake, my face throbbing, my biggest professional accomplishment dissolving into the air like smoke. The party finally broke up around 9. The guests left in a flurry of expensive coats and promises to do this again. I got up, my muscles stiff. I needed to talk to him. "Grandpa, let me help you with your coat," I said, moving toward him. "Oh, don't be silly. Eva, I've got it," Vanessa sang, swooping in between us. She grabbed his arm, her touch overly solicitous. "Walter, you must be exhausted. Let me walk you to your truck. Martin, say goodnight to your father." She was a whirlwind of false care, chattering brightly, steering him toward the door, effectively boxing me out. I stood in the entryway, helpless. He looked back at me over her shoulder, his face grim, and gave me one short, almost imperceptible nod. Then he was gone. I said a brief, cold goodnight to my father, who was already on his phone, and walked out. I didn't say goodbye to Vanessa. The 3-hour drive back to Denver was a blur. The rain was relentless, the windshield wipers struggling to keep up. I drove in total silence. The radio off. I felt hollowed out, humiliated. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, not from cold, but from a deep, cellular rage and shame. It wasn't the slap. It was the ease of it, the confidence she had, that she could do that she could hit me, her adult stepdaughter, and know, with absolute certainty, that she would face no consequences, that I had no one to tell, that my own father would, if forced, take her side. I was nothing in that house. I got to my small apartment in Denver just after midnight. The building was quiet. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat on my sofa in the dark, my coat still on, the cold from the drive seeping into my bones. I could still feel the stinging imprint of her fingers on my face. My phone, silent on the coffee table, suddenly vibrated. The screen lit up the dark room. My heart stopped. The caller ID read, "Gramps' cell." He never, ever called this late. He barely knew how to text. I fumbled for it, my thumbs swiping at the screen. "Grandpa, are you okay? Are you home?" His voice came over the line, and it was not the tired, raspy voice from the party. It was low, gravelly, and tight with a cold fury. "I'm home, Eva girl." A pause. "Eva, tonight, in the kitchen." My breath hitched. "I saw everything. I saw it through the window. And I'm sorry. I am so goddamn sorry I let that woman into this family. I am sorry I let it go on this long." I couldn't speak. The validation. The fact that someone saw. That I wasn't crazy. That it had happened. It broke the dam. A sob, hot and ragged, tore out of my chest. I hadn't cried in the car. I hadn't cried in the kitchen. I cried now, ugly, gulping sobs, in the dark of my apartment. Is your face all right? He asked, his voice gentle now. Did she mark you? It's fine, I managed to choke out. It just stings, Grandpa. She said I was like my mother. I heard that too, he said, his voice hardening again. I heard all of it. I wiped my eyes on my sleeve. You were outside? The whole time? That's what you were looking at. The window? I got there early, Eva, before you did. I saw your car. But I knew what that woman was like. I had a feeling. I didn't go to the front door. I went around back, just to see. And I saw her call you in. I saw her face change. He took a deep, shaky breath. And it wasn't just me that saw a child. I frowned, confused. What do you mean? This old phone of mine, it's not fancy, but it records just fine. My blood went cold. The sobbing stopped instantly. What did you say? I filmed it, Eva. I filmed the whole thing. Her face, her voice, the slap, the sound of that dish breaking. I got it all. I sat bolt upright, my mind, trained for emergency, was suddenly crystal clear. The fog of humiliation evaporated, replaced by something cold, sharp, and focused. This weekend, he said, his voice urgent, I want you to come to the old farm, not the house, the farm. That woman hasn't set foot here in years. Can you do that? Can you come on Saturday? Yes, I said, my voice steady. Yes, I'll be there. Good girl. We have things to discuss. I think it's time you knew a few things about this company, and about a will everyone thinks they understand. The gravel of the long driveway crunched under my tires, a sound that instantly transported me back 20 years. The farm was exactly as I remembered it, and exactly the opposite of my father's house. There were no manicured hedges here, no accent lighting, no beige, just the sprawling, weathered wraparound porch, the peeling white paint that Grandpa insisted gave the wood character, and the smell of pine needles and damp earth. It was Saturday morning, the sky a bruised purple over the mountains, and for the first time in days, my shoulders dropped an inch. I parked next to Grandpa's rusted pickup truck. When I stepped inside the house, the warmth hit me. Not the dry, pumped heat of the mansion, but the deep, bone-settling heat of a wood stove. It smelled of old paper, cedar, and the strong, dark coffee Grandpa brewed thick enough to chew. He was waiting for me in his study, a room I hadn't entered since I was a child. It was a small, cluttered space lined with bookshelves that bowed under the weight of construction manuals, legal encyclopedias, and framed photos of my grandmother. Lock the door, Eva, he said without turning around. He was standing by a heavy steel safe in the corner, the kind with a dial you had to spin, not a digital keypad. On the heavy oak desk in the center of the room, a chaotic spread of paperwork was laid out. There was an old, brick-thick laptop humming on the corner, its fan working hard. Grandpa? I asked, turning the brass lock. What is all this? This, he said, swinging the heavy door of the safe shut and walking over to the desk, is the autopsy of a robbery, and I am the body. He gestured for me to sit. The chair was leather, cracked and soft with age. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. The anger I had heard in his voice on the phone was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp precision. He looked like the man who had built a construction empire from a single toolbox, not the frail old prop Vanessa treated him as. I told you I had been watching, he started, picking up a stack of papers clipped together with a red binder clip. But I haven't just been watching the kitchen window. I have been watching the books. He slid the stack toward me. It was a financial report, but not the glossy one Moore Ridge Construction sent out to investors. This was raw data, rows and rows of numbers, highlighted in angry yellow marker. I retired 5 years ago, Grandpa said, leaning back. I kept 51% of the voting stock, but I let Martin run the day-to-day. I trusted him. He's my son. I thought Vanessa was just expensive. I didn't realize she was a parasite. I looked at the papers. I wasn't an accountant, but I knew how to read charts. I saw a column labeled consulting fees that drained thousands of dollars every month to a company called VP Interiors. VP, I said, looking up. Vanessa Price? Exactly, Grandpa nodded. She has been billing the company $40,000 a month for office aesthetics consulting. But that is just the surface. Look at the loans. He pointed to a section on the second page. My eyes widened. There were 3 massive lines of credit taken out in the last 18 months, totaling nearly $2 million. They took these out against the company's assets, Grandpa explained, his voice steady, against the machinery, the land, and even this farm, and look where the money went. He opened a second folder. It contained bank transfer records. The loan money hadn't gone into new bulldozers or materials. It had been transferred to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, and from there, to purchase high-end real estate assets registered solely in the names of Martin Moore and Tyler Price. The cabin in Aspen, I whispered, remembering Tyler's bragging at dinner. And the townhouse, Grandpa added, and the new cars, and the trips. They are stripping the company for parts. Eva. They are loading Moore Ridge Construction with debt that is guaranteed by me. And they are siphoning the cash into personal assets that I can't touch. If the business fails tomorrow, and with this debt load, it will, they walk away with millions in real estate, and I am left with a bankrupt company and a foreclosed farm. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just bad management. This was theft. It was predatory. Martin was willing to let his own father lose his home so that Vanessa could have her lifestyle, and Tyler could play business tycoon. I suspected it about 6 months ago, Grandpa said. I asked Martin about the profit margins, and he gave me some nonsense about supply chain costs, so I called Arthur. Arthur Penhaligon, your old accountant? He retired 10 years ago, but he still knows where the bodies are buried. He came over here at night, twice a week for a month. We went through everything, digital trails, paper receipts, emails. Martin thought he had deleted. Grandpa tapped the thick laptop. It's all here. A forensic audit. We have proof of embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, and fraud. So, what do we do? I asked, my hands trembling slightly as I touched the cold paper. Do we go to the police? Not yet. The police are a blunt instrument. I need a scalpel. Grandpa pulled a single, crisp document from a blue folder. This is my current will, the one on file at the courthouse. I glanced at it. It was standard. Upon his death, everything went to Martin Moore. If I die today, Grandpa said, Martin gets the 51%. He gets total control. He liquidates the company, pays off the debts with the insurance money, and keeps the stolen assets. He wins. He pushed the document aside and pulled out another one. This one was fresh, printed on heavy watermarked paper, but it wasn't signed yet. This, he said, is what Rebecca Sloan and I drafted yesterday morning. It is the last will and testament of Walter Moore, revised. He flipped to page 4. Read clause 7b. I leaned in. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was razor sharp. In the event that any beneficiary named herein, or their spouse or immediate dependents, is found to have committed an act of physical or documented emotional abuse against the testator or any direct descendant of the testator, said beneficiary shall immediately forfeit all rights to inheritance. The determination of such abuse shall be at the sole discretion of the executor, supported by material evidence. Any direct descendant, I read aloud. That's me. That is you, Grandpa confirmed. And here is the kicker. If Clause 7b is activated, the inheritance does not dissolve. It transfers in its entirety to a trust, the Vantage Ridge Trust. Who controls the trust? I asked. Grandpa looked me dead in the eye. You do. I sat back, the air leaving my lungs. Grandpa, I can't. I'm a nurse. I don't know how to run a construction company. I don't want their money. It is not their money. Grandpa's voice rose, sharp and commanding. He slammed his hand on the desk. It is my money. It is the money I earned sweating in the sun for 40 years while Martin was playing golf. It is the money meant to pay for your education, for your children one day. They are stealing it. Ava, they are stealing your birthright and my legacy. This isn't about you wanting it. It is about stopping them from burning it down. He took a breath, calming himself. You won't have to run the bulldozers. Eva, the trust will own the shares. You will appoint a board. You will hire a CEO who actually knows what he's doing. You will have the power to fire Martin. You will have the power to evict them from the company offices. You will have the control. But we need evidence, I said, my mind racing. The clause says material evidence. It can't just be my word against theirs. They'll say I'm lying. They'll say I'm hysterical. They'll say you're senile. They will try, Grandpa said grimly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver USB drive. He placed it on the desk between us. It looked innocuous, like something you would use to save a term paper. Arthur helped me transfer the file from my phone, he said. The quality is good, better than I expected. He plugged the drive into the laptop and clicked a file. A video window opened. The angle was from outside, looking through rain-streaked glass into a brightly lit kitchen. The audio was slightly muffled by the glass, but clear enough. I saw myself. I looked small. Backed against the sink, I saw Vanessa. Her face was contorted, her mouth moving fast. I heard the muffled words, "You are a burden. Nothing but a little girl." Then, the slap. On the screen, it looked even worse than it had felt. My head snapped back violently. The tray of potatoes fell in slow motion. The sound, crack, was audible even through the window. I watched myself stand there, holding my cheek. I watched Vanessa grab my arm and shake me. Grandpa paused the video. On the screen, Vanessa's face was frozen in a snarl of pure malice. This, Grandpa said, pointing to the screen, is material evidence. It is assault. It is abuse. And because it happened on my property, during an event I hosted, against my granddaughter, it satisfies every requirement of Clause 7B. He closed the laptop. The room felt very quiet. The plan is simple, Grandpa said. Rebecca Sloan is waiting for us at her office on Monday morning. We are going to sign the new will. We are also going to execute 2 other documents. He slid 2 more papers across the desk. Durable power of attorney for finances, I read, and medical power of attorney. Effective immediately, Grandpa said. From the moment we sign these, Martin cannot sign a check over $5,000 without your counter-signature. He cannot take out another loan. He cannot sell a single asset. And if, God forbid, I have a sudden decline in health, Vanessa cannot make medical decisions for me. You will. I looked at the papers, then at the USB drive, then at Grandpa. The weight of it was immense. I had walked in here feeling like a victim of a dysfunctional family. I was being asked to walk out as the executioner of that family's false reality. They will hate me, I said softly. They will come after me. They are already after you, Eva, Grandpa said, his voice softening. They have been eroding you for years. They made you feel small so you wouldn't notice they were stealing the ground from under your feet. This isn't revenge. It is correction. It is gravity. He reached across the desk and covered my hand with his. His skin was papery, but his grip was iron. I built this company to build things that last, he said. Foundations, schools, hospitals. I did not build it to buy Vanessa a collection of handbags or to fund Tyler's ski trips. I want to save what is left, and you are the only one I trust to hold the keys. I looked down at the USB drive. It was so small, just a tiny piece of metal and plastic, but inside it was the end of the beige empire. Inside it was the end of my father's arrogance and Vanessa's cruelty. I thought about the patient at the hospital, the old man abandoned by his son. I thought about Grandpa sitting alone in that corner chair while they drank his wine and plotted his ruin. I picked up the USB drive. It felt cold in my palm. I closed my fingers around it. Okay, I said. The word came out steady, surprising me. Okay, let's go see Rebecca. One more thing, Grandpa said. a glint of the old mischief returning to his eyes. Arthur found something else in the audit. It seems the lease on Tyler's new truck is paid through the company, but the insurance lapsed last month because Martin forgot to transfer the funds. Technically, he is driving a company asset illegally. So, Grandpa said, leaning back, when we restructure the assets next week, one of the first things the new holding company will do is audit the vehicle fleet. I believe we will have grounds to repossess it. I looked at him, and for the first time in a week, a genuine smile touched my lips. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. I can drive a tow truck, I said. I know you can, Grandpa replied. I taught you. I gathered the papers. The fear was still there, buzzing in the back of my mind, but it was being drowned out by a new sensation. Clarity. I wasn't just the nurse daughter anymore. I was the auditor, and the books were about to be balanced. Monday morning in Maple Ridge had a specific rhythm. The logging trucks rumbled through Main Street early, followed by the school buses, and then the shop owners flipping their signs to open. I parked my sedan in front of a narrow, red brick building sandwiched between the bakery and the town post office. The gold lettering on the window was peeling slightly. Sloan and Associates, attorneys at law. It was unassuming, exactly the kind of place Vanessa would sneer at. She preferred glass skyscrapers in Denver with espresso machines in the lobby, but I knew, and Grandpa knew, that Rebecca Sloan was the sharpest legal mind in the county. She had drafted the incorporation papers for Moore Ridge Construction 40 years ago. She knew where the foundation was poured. Grandpa was already inside. He was sitting in a wingback chair, wearing his town suit, a charcoal gray wool number that was at least 10 years old, but pressed to perfection. Rebecca sat behind a desk that was a sea of mahogany and organized chaos. She was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair cut into a sharp bob and glasses that magnified her unblinking, predatory eyes. Eva, she said, not rising but nodding sharply. Walter tells me we have a situation. That is a polite way of putting it, I said, taking the seat next to Grandpa. Show her, Grandpa said. I pulled the silver USB drive from my purse and handed it to Rebecca. She plugged it into her computer without a word. The room fell silent. Save for the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner, I watched her face as the video played. I couldn't see the screen, but I heard the muffled audio, Vanessa's shrill voice, the slap, the crash of the dish. Rebecca's expression didn't change. She watched it once, then she clicked something, presumably checking the file properties. Then she watched it again. Finally, she leaned back and took off her glasses. Timestamp is verified, she said, her voice dry and professional. Location data matches the address of the Moore residence. The audio is clear. You can distinctly identify Vanessa Price and yourself. Eva. The physical assault is unambiguous. The verbal abuse is thorough. She looked at Grandpa. You were right, Walter. This is a smoking gun. But if you pull the trigger now, you just get a messy assault charge and a family feud that drags out in the tabloids. Is that what you want? No, Grandpa said firmly. I want my company back, and I want to ensure Eva is protected. Then we don't file this with the police yet, Rebecca said, tapping the drive. We keep it. This is our leverage. This is the nuclear option. If they contest the will, if they try to claim you are incompetent, if they try to sue Eva, this video shuts them down. It proves a pattern of abuse that triggers the disinheritance clause we discussed. Let's do the paperwork, Grandpa said. For the next 2 hours, the office became a war room. Rebecca summoned 2 witnesses, her paralegal and the woman who ran the bakery next door, to observe the signing. First was the last will and testament. Grandpa signed it with a steady hand, the scratch of the pen loud in the quiet room. The new will explicitly revoked all previous versions. It detailed the creation of the Vantage Ridge Trust, which would inherit the controlling interest in the company. It named me as the sole trustee. Next came the power of attorney documents, one for healthcare, one for finances. This is the shield, Rebecca explained, sliding the papers to me. Once Walter signs this, and once we have a doctor's note on file, which I believe you are seeing Dr. Evans for this afternoon. Walter? It gives Eva the legal authority to step in. Specifically, it allows her to freeze assets if there is suspicion of financial mismanagement. Dr. Evans is an old friend, Grandpa said, signing his name. He knows I'm as sane as he is, but he also knows I'm frail. He winked at me. Then came the complex part, the offensive strategy. Vantage Ridge Holdings, Rebecca announced, opening a thick file. We filed the incorporation papers this morning at 9 o'clock. It is a separate legal entity. The directors are Walter Moore and Eva Moore. She laid out a diagram on the desk. It looked like a battle map. Here is the strategy, she said, using a gold pen to point. Moore Ridge Construction is currently heavy with debt, thanks to Martin and Vanessa. But the core assets, the heavy machinery, the land the headquarters sits on, the intellectual property rights to the Moore Ridge name, are technically owned by the original LLC, of which Walter is the majority shareholder. We are going to execute a quiet transfer, Grandpa explained, his voice low. We are going to sell those core assets from Moore Ridge Construction to Vantage Ridge Holdings. On paper, it will look like a standard restructuring to generate liquidity. Martin will probably sign off on it without reading the fine print because he is desperate for cash to pay the interest on his loans. Once the transfer is complete, Rebecca continued, Vantage Ridge Holdings will own the ground they walk on. They will just be tenants, and if they default on their lease, or if the audits reveal criminal mismanagement, Vantage Ridge Holdings can evict them. Effectively, you are moving the furniture out of the burning house before the roof collapses. I looked at the diagram. It was brilliant. It was ruthless. It was exactly the kind of thing my father would never see coming because he was too busy looking at himself in the mirror. But a knot formed in my stomach. I looked at Grandpa, then at Rebecca. This is going to destroy him, I said softly. I mean, Dad, he's been foolish, and he's weak, but this will leave him with nothing. He'll be humiliated. The whole town will know. Rebecca looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Her expression wasn't unkind, but it was hard. Eva, she said, your father is a grown man. He chose to marry a woman who abuses his daughter. He chose to embezzle money from his own father. He chose to mortgage his company to buy vacation homes. We aren't destroying him. We are just letting the consequences of his actions finally catch up to him. Justice isn't always gentle, kid, Grandpa added softly. Sometimes, you have to break the bone to reset it so it heals straight. I know, I said, taking a deep breath. I know. I never wanted to be the one holding the hammer. You aren't holding the hammer, Rebecca said, closing the file with a snap. You're holding the shield. Don't confuse the two. She leaned forward, her elbows on the mahogany. Now, for this to work, we need time. The asset transfer takes about 3 weeks to finalize. We need Martin and Vanessa to feel secure. We need them to think they are winning so they don't look too closely at the books. We need a distraction, I said. Exactly, Grandpa nodded. We need to give them what they want, or what they think they want. A family meeting, Rebecca suggested. A summit? The purpose? To discuss the future transition of leadership, to discuss Martin taking full control. They'll jump at that, Grandpa said. Vanessa has been pushing for it for months. If I tell them I'm ready to step back, that I'm tired, that I want to sign everything over, they will be so blinded by greed they won't notice we are moving the assets out the back door. We should do it at the farm, I said, the idea forming quickly. Not at their house. If it's at their house, Vanessa controls the environment. She controls the food, the seating, the timing. If it's at the farm, she's uncomfortable. She hates the dirt. It throws her off balance. Perfect, Grandpa agreed. We'll set it for 2 weeks from now. Just before Christmas, we'll frame it as a holiday gathering to settle affairs before the new year. And Eva, Rebecca turned to me, her gaze intense. This is the hard part for you. You have to play the role. You have to be the Eva they expect, the beaten-down daughter, the one who is scared of her stepmother. If you show an inch of spine, if you look confident, Vanessa will get suspicious. She knows she humiliated you. If you come back looking strong, she'll know something is up. You have to let them think they have beaten you. I thought about the kitchen. I thought about the shame of cleaning potatoes off the floor. I thought about the fellowship email I hadn't shown anyone. I can do it, I said. I've been practicing that role for 10 years. Good. Rebecca stood up. The meeting was over. She handed me a thick envelope containing the copies of the new will and the power of attorney. Keep these safe. Put them in a safety deposit box in Denver. Do not leave them in your car. Do not leave them in your apartment. As we walked to the door, Rebecca put a hand on my shoulder. It was a rare gesture of warmth. Eva, she said, I've known your father since he was a boy. He wasn't always like this, but people change, and sometimes the only way to save the person they used to be is to stop the person they've become. Don't forget that. You didn't light this fire. They stacked the wood for years. You're just the one finally opening the flue. I nodded, clutching the envelope to my chest. Thank you, Rebecca. Grandpa walked me to my car. The sun had come out, but the air was biting cold. I'm going to Dr. Evans now, he said. Then I'm going to call Martin. I'm going to sound tired. I'm going to cough a lot. I'm going to tell him I'm ready to rest. He'll believe you, I said, because it's what he wants to hear. You drive safe, Eva girl, Grandpa said, patting the hood of my car. We're in the trenches now. I got into my car and watched him walk toward his truck. He moved slowly, perhaps exaggerating it a little for anyone watching, but his back was straight. I drove out of Maple Ridge, the envelope heavy on the passenger seat. As I hit the highway back to Denver, the landscape opened up. Snow-capped mountains against a bright blue sky. I felt a strange sensation. For years, driving away from Maple Ridge had felt like escaping a prison. Today, it felt like leaving a base camp to gather supplies. I thought about the two paths stretching out in front of me. On one side, there was the fight, the Vantage Ridge Trust, the lawyers, the inevitable screaming match with Vanessa, the complex, messy, painful work of dismantling my family's lies. On the other side, there was my own life, my real life. I reached over and opened my laptop on the passenger seat. I found a rest stop and pulled over. I tethered the connection to my phone. The email from the HR department was still there, waiting. Subject: Fellowship Recommendation. I looked at the accept button. Vanessa had called me a burden. She had said I was clinging to my little nursing certificates to feel superior. She wanted me to be small. She wanted me to be nothing without them. Signing this wasn't just about a career move anymore. It was an act of defiance. It was proof that I didn't need their money. I wasn't fighting for the inheritance because I was greedy. I was fighting for it because it was right. I could walk away from Moore Ridge Construction tomorrow and still be Eva Moore, CRNA, a woman who saved lives. That was a power Vanessa would never understand, because her entire identity was wrapped up in a last name she had married into. I clicked reply. I typed 2 sentences. Dear Committee, I am honored to accept the fellowship position. I look forward to starting in January. I hit send. I sat there for a moment, watching a hawk circle over the highway. I had just secured my future. Now, I was going back to secure my past. I closed the laptop, put the car in gear, and merged back onto the highway. The tires hummed on the asphalt. I whispered the words to the empty car, a rehearsal for the performance I would have to give in 2 weeks. Yes, Dad. Whatever you say. Vanessa, I just want everyone to be happy. My voice sounded small, weak, and perfectly convincing, but my hands on the steering wheel were rock steady. 2 weeks later, the trap was set. It arrived in the form of a handwritten note from Grandpa Walter, delivered to my father's office by courier. It was old-fashioned, deliberate, and irresistible. He wrote that he was feeling his age, that the winter was settling into his bones, and that he wanted to have a private family dinner at the farm to settle the future of the company and the family before the new year began. Vanessa took the bait instantly. To her, this was not an invitation. It was a capitulation. She saw an old man finally admitting he was too weak to hold the reins. She saw the final signature on the deed to the empire. I received the summons in the group chat an hour later. Vanessa did not ask if I was free. She simply wrote, "We are going to the farm on Saturday evening. Grandpa is finally ready to make the transition official. It is important that you are there to witness your father and Tyler taking on their rightful responsibilities. We need a united front." The implication was clear. I was being invited to watch my inheritance evaporate. I was being invited to applaud as they stripped the last of my grandfather's legacy and handed it to her son. I waited 2 hours before replying. I sat in the break room at the hospital, staring at the phone, rehearsing the lines Rebecca Sloan had given me. I had to be the beaten dog. I had to be the daughter who was too tired to fight, the one who had accepted her place in the shadows. I typed, "I am scheduled for a double shift on Saturday. I don't think I can make it." My father called 4 minutes later. His voice was tight, a mixture of stress and that specific, wheedling tone he used when he needed me to be a prop. "Eva, you have to come," he said. "Look, I know you are busy. I know you have your work, but this is Grandpa. He sounds tired. Eva, he wants the whole family. If you aren't there, it might upset him, and we need him to be calm. We need this to go smoothly, for everyone's sake." He was weaponizing my love for Grandpa against me, just as he always did. He was telling me that if I didn't come and smile while they robbed him, his distress would be my fault. I let a long, shaky sigh escape into the receiver. I made sure I sounded defeated. "Okay, Dad," I said quietly. "I will try to swap shifts, but I can only stay for dinner." "Good girl," he said, the relief audible. "Just wear something nice. And Eva, let's keep the mood light. No drama." I hung up. I stared at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. I didn't see the tired nurse anymore. I saw the person holding the matches. On Saturday, I drove to the farm. The sun was setting early, casting long, bruised shadows across the snow. When I pulled up, my father's massive luxury SUV was already parked next to Grandpa's rusted truck. The contrast made my stomach turn. It was a visual representation of where the money had gone. I walked up the porch steps. I had dressed in a simple gray sweater and dark trousers. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed successful professional. I needed to look small. Inside, the farmhouse was warm, but the atmosphere was brittle. Vanessa had clearly tried to exert her influence even here. She had brought her own wine, her own napkins, and a floral centerpiece that looked ridiculous on the scarred oak table. Grandpa was sitting in his leather armchair by the fire. He was putting on a master class in acting. He had a blanket draped over his legs. His hands trembled slightly as he held his teacup. He looked frailer than he had in the lawyer's office, his shoulders hunched, his eyes a little watery. Martin was pacing, energized, nervous. Vanessa was perched on the edge of the sofa, her posture rigid, her eyes darting around the room as if appraising the furniture for an estate sale. "Eva, you made it," Vanessa said, not standing up. Her voice was light, but her eyes were cold. She scanned me, satisfied by my plain clothes and slumped shoulders. "Good. We were just getting settled." "Hi, Grandpa," I said. Ignoring her and going to him, I kissed his cheek. He smelled of wood smoke and peppermint. He gave my hand a squeeze, firm, strong, totally at odds with his trembling performance, before letting go. Sit, Grandpa said, his voice scratching like dry leaves. "Let's not stand on ceremony. I don't have the energy for it tonight." We moved to the table. The dinner was simple. A roast Grandpa had put in the slow cooker. Not the catered feast Vanessa preferred. She picked at the meat, her nose wrinkling slightly. "So, Dad," Martin started, unable to wait even until the plates were cleared. "You mentioned in your note that you wanted to talk about the future, about the transition." Grandpa nodded slowly, taking a sip of water. "I have been doing a lot of thinking. Martin, about the company, about the farm. I am not getting any younger. This winter. It feels colder than the last ones." Vanessa leaned forward, her predatory instinct fully awakened. "Oh, Walter, you have worked so hard for so long. You deserve to rest. You deserve to let go of all this stress. That is what Martin and Tyler are here for, to carry the burden for you." "Tyler couldn't be here tonight?" Grandpa asked. "He is at the site," Martin said quickly, showing some investors the new framing. "The boy is a workhorse. Dad, just like you were. He lives and breathes that company." I kept my eyes on my plate, cutting my roast into tiny, precise squares. A workhorse. Tyler hadn't been to a job site before 10 in the morning in his life. "I was thinking," Grandpa said, his eyes drifting to the fire, "that maybe it is time to settle the ownership, the shares, the control. I want to make sure the family is taken care of." "Exactly," Vanessa breathed. She reached out and covered Grandpa's hand with hers. Her manicure was perfect, a sharp contrast to his liver-spotted skin. "We just want you to have peace of mind. Walter, Martin is ready. Tyler is ready. We have such big plans for the next quarter." Grandpa looked at me. The look was sad, apologetic. "But what about Eva?" he asked. The room went silent. This was the test. This was the moment Grandpa had scripted to make them say it out loud. Vanessa laughed, a tinkling, dismissive sound. "Oh, Walter, Eva has her nursing. She has her job at the hospital. She is doing just fine." "But the company," Grandpa pressed, his voice wavering. "It is the family legacy. Shouldn't she have a part in it?" Martin cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Dad, look, Eva is a great girl. She is. But construction? It is a tough business. It is a man's world. Really. You need grit. You need to be able to talk to the contractors, the unions. She is soft. She is a caretaker. She is better suited for supporting roles," Vanessa added, smiling at me with dead eyes. "You know, Eva doesn't care about business. Walter, she never has. She doesn't care about money. She is happy with her little apartment and her shifts, giving her shares. Well, it would just be a burden to her. She wouldn't know what to do with them." I felt the heat rise in my neck. It wasn't shame this time. It was a hot, pure anger. They were carving me out of my own family, right in front of my face, using my softness as the knife. I looked up. I forced a small, sad smile. "Dad is right. Grandpa, I don't know anything about construction. I just want everyone to be happy. I don't want to be in the way." Vanessa beamed. "See? She admits it herself. Eva is sensible." Grandpa sighed, a long, rattling sound. He looked defeated. "All right, if that is how you all feel, I just want to be fair." "Fairness is about putting resources where they grow best," Martin said, gaining confidence. "And speaking of growing, Dad, we need to talk about the bridge loan. For the expansion, the bank needs your signature on the collateral agreement by Tuesday. We are using the farm deed as the guarantee, just like we discussed." My heart hammered against my ribs. They were going to mortgage the farm, the very house we were sitting in, the house my mother had loved. I looked at Grandpa. His face hadn't changed, but his thumb was rubbing the handle of his knife, hard. "You want to leverage the farm?" Grandpa asked quietly. "It is just a formality," Vanessa said quickly. "The equity is just sitting here. Walter, dead money, we use it to secure the loan. We build the new complex, and we pay it back in 6 months. It is smart investing." Tyler was the one who crunched the numbers. I gripped my fork until my knuckles turned white. I knew the numbers. I had seen the audit. There was no new complex. There was just a black hole of debt and a shell company in the Caymans. "I don't know," Grandpa said. He put his fork down. He looked at Martin, then at Vanessa. His acting shifted. The frailty evaporated. Just for a second, replaced by a hardness that made Martin blink. "I have been seeing things lately," Grandpa said. Vanessa frowned. "Seeing things? Like, your eyes are bothering you?" "No," Grandpa said, seeing things clearly. He picked up his napkin and dabbed his mouth. "I saw things on Thanksgiving. Martin." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vanessa froze. Her hand, which had been reaching for her wine glass, stopped in midair. "What do you mean?" Martin asked, laughing nervously. "Thanksgiving was great. Everyone had a great time." Grandpa turned his head and looked at the kitchen door of the farmhouse. It was a swinging door, just like the one at Martin's house. "I saw how people treat family when they think no one is watching." Grandpa said softly, "I saw how the people I trusted with my company treat the people I love, and it made me wonder, if they treat their own blood like that, how are they treating my money?" Vanessa went pale. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide, searching my face. She was remembering the window. She was remembering the dark, rainy glass over the sink, but she reassured herself. It was dark. It was raining. He was old. He couldn't have seen. I kept my face blank. I looked down at my lap, playing the role of the confused, submissive daughter. "I am going to take a few days," Grandpa said, leaning back in his chair. "I am going to look at the papers again. I am going to look at the will, and I am going to make a decision based on merit, not just blood, but behavior." Martin stood up, agitated. "Dad, we don't have a few days. The bank needs—" "The bank can wait," Grandpa snapped. The authority in his voice cracked like a whip. Martin sat back down, stunned. Grandpa coughed, covering the moment of strength with a return to illness. "I am tired now. I think you should all go." The dinner ended in a disjointed, awkward silence. There was no dessert. There were no toasts to the future. We walked to the door. Martin was fuming, muttering about interest rates and deadlines. Vanessa was rattled. She couldn't figure out what had just happened. She had walked in expecting a coronation and had walked out with a question mark. At the door, she turned to me. She didn't hug me. She extended a hand, limp and cold. "Well," she said, her voice tight, "I suppose you are happy. You got to play the favorite granddaughter again." I took her hand. It felt lifeless. I looked her in the eye, and for the first time that night, I let the mask slip. Just a fraction. I didn't look down. I didn't hunch my shoulders. I stood up to my full height. I smiled. It wasn't the sad, submissive smile I had worn at the table. It was the smile of someone who knows the ending of the movie while everyone else is still guessing. "Drive safe, Vanessa," I said. "The roads can be slippery when you don't see what's coming." She pulled her hand away as if I had burned her. She narrowed her eyes, searching my face for the source of this sudden confidence, but I had already turned away to help Grandpa with the lock. I watched them drive away, their taillights disappearing into the dark. Grandpa stood beside me on the porch. He wasn't shaking anymore. He stood tall, breathing in the cold night air. "They took the bait," he said. "Hook, line, and sinker," I replied. He looked at me. "You did good. Ava, it was hard to sit there and let them talk about you like that." I shrugged. It doesn't matter what they say. "Grandpa, they are just tenants, and their lease is up." We went back inside and locked the door. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt fortified. We had the will. We had the power of attorney. We had the video. And now, we had the proof that given the chance, they would sell the roof over his head to buy themselves a little more time in the sun. I walked to my car, my laptop bag heavy on my shoulder. Inside was the acceptance email for my fellowship. I was building a life they couldn't touch, and in a few days, I would help Grandpa dismantle the one they had stolen. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. I wasn't just driving back to Denver. I was driving toward the final act, 365 days. That was how long I had lived with the secret. A lot can happen in a year. I had completed my fellowship and was now a fully certified pediatric nurse anesthetist at Ridgeview. I walked into operating rooms with my head high, commanding the respect of surgeons who used to ignore me. I had bought my own condo, a place with big windows and no beige carpet. I had a life that was full, vibrant, and entirely mine. But in the background, the machinery of justice had been grinding, slow and relentless. Grandpa Walter and I, along with Rebecca Sloan, had been busy. Vantage Ridge Holdings, the entity we created in that small law office, had been quietly acquiring the debt and assets of Moore Ridge Construction. Every time Martin and Vanessa panicked about cash flow, they sold off a piece of machinery or a parcel of land to a blind trust to stay afloat. They thought they were liquidating assets to save the company. In reality, they were selling my grandfather's legacy back to him, piece by piece, while retaining nothing but the liabilities. Martin looked 10 years older when I saw him pull up to the farm that Thanksgiving. His hair was thinner, his suit a little looser. He spent the first hour complaining about market volatility and predatory interest rates. He didn't know the predator was sitting across the room, drinking tea and checking the roast. Vanessa, conversely, was manic. She was tighter, sharper, vibrating with a nervous energy that made her brittle. She had spent the year waiting for Grandpa to die or capitulate, and he had done neither. He had simply stayed at the farm, resting, while the company she treated as her piggy bank slowly dried up. This Thanksgiving, the invitation had come from Grandpa again. "One last tradition," he had said. "At the farm, I have an announcement to make." Vanessa agreed because she was desperate. She needed that announcement to be a transfer of power. She needed a miracle. I arrived at the farm at 2 p.m. I was not alone. "Thanks for doing this, Lena," I said as we parked next to the barn. Lena was an OR nurse I worked with, a woman with eyes that missed nothing and a demeanor that could calm a panicked surgeon in 10 seconds. She was also, officially, a neutral third party invited as my guest. Unofficially, she was a witness. "I wouldn't miss it," Lena said, checking her phone. "Rebecca said she is on standby?" "Yes, she is waiting for the call." We walked inside. The farmhouse smelled of sage and roasted turkey, the same smell that had greeted me for 20 years, but today it smelled like closure. Vanessa met us at the door. She paused when she saw Lena. "Oh," she said, her smile slipping. "I didn't know we were having outsiders." "This is Lena," I said, stepping past her. "She is a colleague. I didn't want to drive back alone in the dark, and Grandpa said the more the merrier." Vanessa couldn't argue. She was too anxious about the announcement to risk a scene. She just gestured vaguely to the living room. "Well, make yourself at home." The afternoon was a study in tension. Martin paced the floor, checking his phone every 3 minutes. Tyler, who looked sullen and bored, sat in the corner playing games on his tablet. He had lost his company truck 6 months ago when the new auditors repossessed it, and he was currently driving a used sedan that he clearly despised. Grandpa sat in his chair, watching them. He looked stronger this year. The act of frailty had served its purpose, and he was shedding it, layer by layer. Dinner was a quiet affair. The clinking of silverware on china sounded like gunshots. "So, Dad," Martin said, cutting into his turkey, "about this announcement, the bank is really breathing down my neck about the restructuring. If we could get the paperwork signed tonight." "Eat your dinner, Martin," Grandpa said. His voice was calm, authoritative. "We will talk in the living room, after the pie." Vanessa's eyes darted around the table. She looked at me, then at Lena, then at Grandpa. She sensed something was wrong. The air was too heavy. The script wasn't following her expected path. "Is everything okay, Walter?" she asked, her voice high. "You seem serious." "I am serious," Grandpa said. "Thanksgiving is a serious business. It is about gratitude and about truth." I ate my potatoes, my grandmother's recipe, which I had made again and which sat proudly in the center of the table, and felt a strange calm. I wasn't the scared girl backed against the sink anymore. I was the one holding the remote control. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Grandpa had set up a portable projector screen in front of the fireplace. It was a stark white rectangle in the cozy room. "A presentation," Tyler scoffed, falling onto the sofa. "What is this, a board meeting?" "In a way," Grandpa said. He sat in his armchair and picked up a remote. "I wanted to look back before we look forward. I wanted to remind us all of where we came from." He pressed a button. The projector whirred to life. The first image was a black and white photo of the farm from 40 years ago. It was just a frame and a muddy field. Then, a picture of Grandpa and a very young Martin standing in front of the first Moore Ridge truck. "We built this from dirt," Grandpa said softly. "Brick by brick." The next slide was a picture of my mother. She was laughing, holding a baby, me, in her arms. She looked radiant, messy, and real. Martin went still. He stared at the screen, his jaw working. He hadn't seen a picture of her in this house in 10 years. Vanessa had removed them all. "She loved this house," Grandpa said. Then came a picture of me at 7 years old, wearing oversized rubber boots, helping Grandpa fix a fence, a picture of the whole family at a picnic table, before Vanessa, before the beige carpets, before the lies. The atmosphere in the room shifted. It went from anxious to heavy with a suffocating nostalgia. It was a reminder of a time when the family was whole, before it was monetized. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. "This is lovely, Walter, really, but is there a point to this? We have the contracts to discuss." "The point," Grandpa said, "is that a house is just wood and nails. A home is how you treat the people inside it." He looked at me. I nodded. "I have one more video," Grandpa said. "It is from last year. I think it is important we watch it together." Vanessa frowned. "Last year? We didn't take any videos last year." "I did," Grandpa said. He pressed the button. The screen flickered. The image that appeared was not a posed family photo. It was dark, framed by wet, black jagged edges. Rain streaks blurred the center. It took a moment for everyone to realize what they were looking at. It was a view through a window, looking into a brightly lit kitchen. My breath caught in my throat, even though I knew it was coming. On the screen, 2 figures stood in the stark, yellow light. One was me, wearing the dark sweater I had worn last year. The other was Vanessa. She was wearing that white silk blouse. The audio was muffled but distinct, cutting through the silence of the living room like a knife. "You are a burden, Eva. You have always been a burden." Martin sat up straight, his eyes widening. Tyler put his tablet down. On the screen, Vanessa stepped closer to me. Her face was twisted, ugly with a rage she never showed in public. "You will not smear this family. If you ever say something like that again, you will be nothing to us." In the living room, the real Vanessa gasped. She stood up, her hand flying to her mouth. "What? What is this? Walter, turn this off." Grandpa didn't move. He kept his finger off the button. On the screen, the tension broke. Vanessa's hand moved. The slap was loud, a sharp crack that echoed through the speakers. Martin flinched physically, as if he had been hit. The video continued. The dish fell. The potatoes exploded across the floor. On screen, Vanessa grabbed my arm, shaking me. "You clumsy, stupid girl, look what you did." The cruelty was naked. It was undeniable. It wasn't just a disagreement. It was an assault. Grandpa pressed pause. The image froze on Vanessa's snarling face, looming over me. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of everyone's lungs. Martin turned to look at his wife. His face was pale, drained of all color. He looked like he was seeing a stranger. "Vanessa?" he whispered. You said she dropped the dish. You said it was an accident." Vanessa was shaking. She looked from the screen to Martin, then to Grandpa, then to me. Her eyes were wild. It was. That video. It's out of context. She provoked me. She was screaming at me. You can't hear what she said." "I heard everything," Grandpa said. His voice was low, dangerous. "I was standing outside the window. I heard every word." Tyler looked at his mother. For the first time in his life, the golden boy looked horrified. "Mom, you hit her?" "It was a stressful day," Vanessa shrieked, her voice cracking. "I was under so much pressure. The dinner, the guests. She came in late. She was disrespectful. It was just a slap. It was a discipline thing." "She was 27 years old," I said. My voice was calm, cutting through her hysteria. "I was a grown woman, and you hit me because I told you I didn't owe you gratitude for neglecting me." "This is illegal," Vanessa pointed a trembling finger at Grandpa. "You filmed me without my consent. You can't show this." "In my house?" Grandpa said. "Through my window? I can do whatever I damn well please." He stood up. The blanket fell away from his legs. He didn't need it. He walked to the center of the room, standing between the projector screen and his family. "I watched that video a year ago," Grandpa said, "and I realized something. I realized that I had let a wolf into my house, and worse, I realized my son was holding the door open for her." Martin put his head in his hands. "Dad, I didn't know. I swear." "You didn't know because you didn't look," Grandpa snapped. "You were too busy looking at the country club membership and the new cars. You let your wife abuse your daughter to keep your life comfortable." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He threw it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud. "That," Grandpa said, "is my new will, and the restructuring documents for the company." Martin looked up. "Restructuring?" "Moore Ridge Construction is gone, Martin," Grandpa said brutally. "The assets have been transferred. The land, the equipment, the contracts. They are now owned by Vantage Ridge Holdings." "Vantage Ridge?" Martin repeated, confused. Who owns that?" "I do," Grandpa said. "And Ava does." Vanessa let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. You gave it to her? To her?" "I gave it to the person who knows how to care for things," Grandpa said. "Clause 7B of the will. In the event of proven physical or emotional abuse against a family member, the beneficiary is disinherited. That video? That is the proof. You are out. Vanessa, you get nothing. Not a dime. Not a share. Nothing." "You can't do that!" Vanessa screamed. She lunged toward the table, but Lena stood up. She didn't do anything aggressive. She just stood there, calm and solid, blocking the path. Vanessa stopped, panting. "Martin!" Vanessa turned to her husband, grabbing his lapels. "Do something! He is stealing our future. He is stealing Tyler's future." Martin looked at the papers on the table. Then he looked at the frozen image on the screen. His wife's face, twisted in hate. His daughter's face, shocked and in pain. He looked at me. "Ava," he said, his voice trembling. "You knew? You knew this whole time?" "Yes," I said. "I knew when you bought the cabin in Aspen with company money. I knew when you leased the cars. I knew when you tried to mortgage this farm." Martin flinched. "We didn't steal the company, Dad," I said softly. "We saved it. From you." Tyler stood up. He looked at his mother, who was now sobbing hysterically, and then at Martin, who looked like a man watching his house burn down. He picked up his keys. "I'm leaving," Tyler said. "Tyler, wait," Vanessa cried. "For what?" Tyler spat. "There's no money left. Is there? That's what this is about. The ride is over." He walked out the front door without looking back. Vanessa collapsed onto the sofa. She didn't look elegant anymore. She looked small, vicious, and defeated. Her performance had been canceled. The lights were on, and the audience had seen the wires. Martin stood up slowly. He looked at Grandpa. "Dad, surely." "Go home, Martin," Grandpa said. He sounded tired now, but it was a clean tiredness. "Go home and look at your finances. Read the documents. And then, if you want to have a relationship with this family, with me, with your daughter, you figure out who you are when you aren't hiding behind her skirts." Martin looked at me. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to beg, but he saw the look on my face. It wasn't anger, it was indifference. I didn't need his approval anymore. He turned and walked out the door. We heard the heavy engine of his SUV start up, then the sound of tires on gravel. Vanessa was the last to leave. She stood up, wiping her face, trying to reassemble the mask, but it was broken. "You will hear from my lawyers," she hissed at me. "I expect so," I said calmly. "Rebecca Sloan is representing the trust. She has the video, she has the audit, she has the witness testimony." I nodded at Lena. "Feel free to call her." Vanessa looked at Lena, then at the screen one last time. She grabbed her purse and fled. The door slammed shut. The silence that followed was not heavy. It was light. It was the silence of a storm that had finally broken. Grandpa sat down heavily in his chair. He let out a long breath. "Well," he said, "that was unpleasant." "It was necessary," I said. I walked over and sat on the arm of his chair. Lena walked over to the projector and turned it off. The image of the slap vanished, leaving just the white screen. "You okay?" Lena asked me. I looked around the room. The floral centerpiece Vanessa had brought was wilting. The fire was crackling. I looked at the empty spaces where they had been, and I didn't feel loss. I felt space. Space to breathe. Space to build something new. "Yeah," I said, and I realized I meant it. "I'm okay." Grandpa reached up and patted my hand. "You held your ground, Eva girl. You didn't flinch." "I learned from the best," I said. I looked at the darkened window of the living room. Outside, the night was black and cold. But inside, the fire was warm. I wasn't the girl in the window anymore. I was the one sitting by the fire, holding the keys to the house. The silence in the living room was absolute, a physical weight that pressed against the walls. Vanessa was slumped on the sofa, her face a ruin of smeared mascara and shock. Martin stood near the fireplace, looking like a man who had just watched his entire world dissolve into pixelated footage of his own cruelty. Tyler was frozen near the door, his hand on the knob, caught between flight and the paralyzing realization that there was nowhere to run. Then, the door to the small study at the back of the house opened. Rebecca Sloan stepped out. She did not look like a family friend attending a holiday dinner. She looked like a judge walking into a courtroom. She carried a thick, sealed envelope in one hand and a leather binder in the other. She walked to the center of the room, placed the binder on the coffee table with a heavy, deliberate sound, and looked at my father. "I am glad everyone is still here," Rebecca said, her voice crisp and devoid of warmth, "because before anyone leaves, we need to clarify the legal reality of this family." She broke the wax seal on the envelope. The sound was sharp, like a dry twig snapping. "This is the last will and testament of Walter Moore, executed and notarized this week," Rebecca announced. She unfolded the document. It supersedes all previous wills. It also outlines the immediate restructuring of Moore Ridge construction. Martin took a step forward, his voice trembling. "You can't do this. Rebecca, you can't just rewrite everything because of a video." "I didn't rewrite it," Rebecca said, looking at him over her glasses. "Your father did, and the video is not just a video. Martin, it is evidence." She began to read. Her voice was steady, hammering the final nails into the coffin of their entitlement. "Effective immediately, the controlling interest in Moore Ridge construction, including all physical assets, land, and intellectual property, is transferred to Vantage Ridge Holdings. The sole directors of this holding company are Walter Moore and Eva Moore." Vanessa let out a strangled sound, but Rebecca did not pause. "Furthermore, under Clause 7b, the disinheritance, via abuse clause, any beneficiary found to have committed verified physical or emotional abuse against the testator or a direct descendant of the testator forfeits all rights to inheritance. The video evidence provided, authenticated by date and location metadata, confirms that Vanessa Moore committed assault against Eva Moore on the premises." Rebecca looked up, her eyes locking onto Vanessa. "This means, Vanessa, that you are removed from the will entirely. You receive 0% of the estate, no cash, no shares, no property." Vanessa stood up, shaking. "You can't do that. I have rights. I am his wife." "You signed a prenuptial agreement," Rebecca reminded her coldly, "and that agreement has a clause regarding criminal conduct. Assault is a crime. You voided your own safety net the moment you raised your hand against his granddaughter." Rebecca turned to Martin. "As for you, Martin, the audit is complete. We have traced the loans. We have traced the transfers to the Cayman accounts. We know about the cabin. We know about the cars." Martin went white. That was business. That was creative accounting. It was embezzlement. I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through his excuses. You took loans out in Grandpa's name to buy things for yourself. You leveraged this farm to pay for Vanessa's wardrobe. Rebecca nodded. The trust is ordering a full forensic audit of all personal assets acquired by Martin Moore and Tyler Price in the last 5 years. We are issuing a demand for repayment of unauthorized loans. If the funds are not returned, we will seize the assets. The cabin, the townhouse, the cars. They all belong to the company now. Tyler dropped his hand from the doorknob. He looked at his mother, then at Martin. The reality was crashing down on him. He wasn't the heir to a construction empire. He was 25 years old, unemployed, and standing on the edge of bankruptcy. "This is insane," Martin shouted, his face flushing red. "You are destroying this family." "Over what? A slap? A little argument in a kitchen? You are going to ruin us because Eva is vindictive?" He turned to me, his eyes pleading and angry all at once. "Eva, tell him. Tell him this is too far. You are going to put your father on the street? Over one bad night?" I looked at him. I looked at the man who had let me pay for my own textbooks while he bought his stepson a truck. I looked at the man who had told me to be quiet, to make myself small, to be grateful for the scraps of affection he threw my way. I stood up. My legs were steady. "I am not putting you on the street. Dad," I said, "you have a house. You have a job. If you choose to actually work instead of just spending money, but the free ride is over." I took a breath, and the air in my lungs felt clean. "I am not vindictive," I continued. "I don't want to see you suffer, but I am done setting myself on fire to keep you warm. I am done watching you let her hurt me and calling it family. The line is drawn here. No more loans, no more using Grandpa's name to cover your mistakes, and no more abuse disguised as stress." Martin stared at me. He looked for the scared little girl who used to beg for his approval. She wasn't there. Grandpa stood up then. He walked over to Tyler. Tyler looked terrified. He braced himself, expecting to be thrown out. "You are young," Grandpa said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "You have been taught that money is something you are given, not something you earn. That is a failure of your parents, not you." Tyler blinked, surprised. "If you want a place in this company," Grandpa said, "you can have one, but not as a manager, not as a director. You can start on the crew, minimum wage. You learn to pour concrete. You learn to frame a wall. You report to the foreman, and the foreman reports to Eva." "Me?" Tyler looked at me, shock written all over his face. "Yes," Grandpa said, "Eva controls the board. If you prove you can work, really work, there is a future for you. If you don't, you can leave. The choice is yours." Tyler looked down at his expensive shoes. He didn't say yes, but he didn't walk out the door. For the first time, he looked like he was considering the concept of work. Vanessa had heard enough. She grabbed her purse, her knuckles white. "I am leaving," she spat, "and I'm calling my lawyer. You think you can steal everything from me? We will see about that." "Go ahead," Rebecca said calmly, "but before you spend money on legal fees, I suggest you read the documents Martin signed regarding the loans. You are a co-signatory. Vanessa, if you sue the estate, we will countersue for the immediate repayment of the $2 million you helped misappropriate." Vanessa froze. She realized, with a dawning horror, that she had signed those papers without reading them, trusting Martin to handle the details. She was trapped. She looked at me one last time. Her eyes were full of hate, but beneath it, there was fear. She turned and stormed out into the cold night. The front door slammed, shaking the pictures on the walls. Martin stood alone in the center of the room. He looked at the door where his wife had gone, then back at us. He looked deflated, like a balloon that had lost its air. He took a step toward me. "Eva, can we just talk? Just you and me?" I looked at him. I saw the manipulation gearing up, the attempt to charm, to guilt, to twist the narrative back to where he was the victim. "No, Dad," I said, "not tonight." "I need you to understand," he started. I do understand. I interrupted. That is the problem. I understand perfectly. You chose her. You chose the money. You chose the image. And now that those things are gone, you want to choose me because I am the only one left standing. I walked over to Grandpa and put my hand on his shoulder. I need time. Dad, I said, and this time, I am not waiting for you to pick me. I am picking myself. Martin stood there for a long moment. Then, he nodded. A jerky, broken motion. He turned and walked out the door, into the darkness, to follow the wife who had led him off a cliff. The months that followed were hard, but they were the good kind of hard. They were the kind of hard that comes from building a foundation, not trying to hold up a collapsing roof. We didn't destroy the company. We cleaned it. With Rebecca's help, Eva and I, mostly Eva, audited every account. We sold the cabin in Aspen. We sold the luxury cars. We paid down the high-interest debt. Grandpa kept his word. He established the Walter Moore Nursing Scholarship for students from Maple Ridge. It was funded by the money that used to go to Vanessa's consulting fees. Every year, 2 students would get a full ride to nursing school. It was the best revenge I could imagine, taking the money that was used to belittle my profession and using it to launch the careers of people just like me. Tyler actually showed up for work. He hated it at first. He came home blistered and exhausted, complaining to anyone who would listen. But after 3 months, the complaining stopped. He started asking questions about the blueprints. He started treating me with a cautious respect. He wasn't a manager, but he was becoming a man. And then, it was Thanksgiving again. The farm looked different this year. The peeling paint had been scraped and redone. The roof was patched. Inside, the smell of sage and butter was stronger than ever. I stood in the kitchen, mashing the potatoes in the big ceramic bowl. Lena was there, chopping parsley and laughing at a joke Grandpa had told. Aunt Carol, who hadn't been invited to a family dinner in 10 years, was setting the table with the good silver. There were no catered trays. There were no beige decorations. The table was a chaotic mix of mismatched chairs and colorful plates. Grandpa walked into the kitchen. He looked healthy. His cough was gone. He leaned against the counter and watched me work. "You allow plenty of butter in those?" he asked, eyeing the bowl. "Grandpa's recipe." I smiled. 50% potato, 50% butter. He chuckled. "Good. That is how it should be." He looked out the window over the sink, the same window where, 2 years ago, a tragedy had played out in the dark. "You know," he said softly, "I am glad I looked through that window. But I am gladder that you opened the door." I stopped mashing. I looked at the window. It was dark outside, and the glass reflected the kitchen behind me. I saw myself. I wasn't the girl in the scrubs, exhausted and apologetic. I wasn't the daughter trying to shrink herself to fit into a space that didn't want her. I saw a woman who was a trustee of a major company, a woman who was a top-tier pediatric anesthetist, a woman who had stood up to a bully and won. I realized then that the slap hadn't broken me. It had woken me up. It had been the shock I needed to stop waiting for permission to exist. "Dinner is ready," I called out. We gathered around the table. It was crowded. It was loud. There was laughter. Real laughter. Not the polite, performative kind. I sat at the head of the table, opposite Grandpa. I raised my glass of wine. "To family," I said. "To family," everyone echoed. I looked at the faces around me. This wasn't a perfect family. It was messy. It was scarred. But it was honest. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a guest at my own table. I took a sip of wine and looked at the empty chair where Vanessa used to sit. It wasn't empty anymore. My friend Lena was sitting there, telling a story about a surgery that went wrong and how we fixed it. I smiled. The house didn't belong to the Moores anymore. It belonged to us, and that was something to be truly thankful for. Thank you for listening to my story, and I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please comment below to share your thoughts and connect with others. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story be heard by even more people.